all these things I've done. Chapter 15. We mourn again. I learned the definition of internecine. We didn't get back to the city until Sunday after lunch. Wynn went to his apartment straight from the train station. His apartment's fairly close to Grand Central Station, and Leo, Addie, and I made our way back to ours. I was eager to be home. I was sleepy and hungry, and I had a ton of schoolwork. Besides which, being away always made me anxious. As the weather was unseasonably warm for February, Leo and Addie wanted to walk from the train station or take the bus. I had wanted to take the bus in order to expedite the trip, but I had been overruled. We were nearly halfway home when I began to feel an inexplicable and almost painful need to be back in the apartment. I quickened my pace. "Slow down," Addie said. "You're walking too fast for us." I turned my head over my shoulder and suggested we race. We had just reached the anarchistically named Museum Mile, which, along with the park side, is a fairly straight shot back to our apartment. "Come back, Annie," Leo said. "It's not fair if you have a head start." I backtracked to where Nanny and Leo were standing. "On your mark," I said. "Get set, go." Natty, Leo, and I raced up the sidewalk. Leo was in the lead, with Natty not too far behind. I was last, but I liked that position. Easier to keep my eyes on my siblings. Even though we were panting and red-faced, we got home in less than 10 minutes. The exertion had quelled my anxiety, too. "Take the stairs?" Leo joked. "Good one, Leo," I said, pushing the elevator button. In contrast to the mild day outside, it was unusually cold inside the apartment. A draft was coming from the living room, so I went to close the windows. In the living room, I found Imogen seated on the sofa, and the disquiet I had felt earlier immediately returned. "Something's wrong," I said. Imogen shook her head. "Where are Natty and Leo?" "In their rooms," I told her. "Sit down," she said, and I knew this instruction could only mean one thing. "I'd rather stand," I insisted. "If you're going to tell me Nana is dead, I'd rather stand." "She died last night. There was a power failure. The backup generator didn't work for whatever reason. By the time the power came back on, it was too late. I'm sure she didn't suffer much." "How do you know?" I asked. "How do I know what?" Imogen replied. "That she didn't suffer much. How can you possibly know?" Imogen said nothing. "You don't know. Maybe it was horrible. While you slept, maybe she choked and gasped and her skin felt like fire. She thought her eyes would pop out of her head. She prayed for it all to be over." Imogen reached out to her hand on my arm. "Please, Annie, don't do this." "Don't touch me!" I pulled my arm away. I could feel my old rage returning. I slipped into it easily, like a tailored suit. "Your whole job was to make sure that these machines kept running. You failed miserably. You're a failure and an idiot and a murderer." "No, Annie. Never," Imogen protested. Leo came in the room. "Annie, why are you yelling at Imogen?" he asked. But I couldn't be bothered to address my brother. I was in the angry fugue state. "Maybe someone paid you to unplug Nana's machine." Imogen began to cry. "Annie, why would I ever do that?" "How should I know? People with all sorts of things for money. All my family has are enemies. How can you say these things to me? I love Galena just as I love you and your entire family. It was her time. She told me as much. I know she told you too. Or at least, she tried to." "Nana's dead?" Leo asked in a panicked voice. "Are you saying that Nana is dead?" "Yes," I said. "She died last night. Imogen let her die." "That isn't true," Imogen replied. "Get out of our house," I ordered her, "and don't ever come back." "Please, Anya, let me help. You have to make arrangements for the body. You shouldn't have to do this alone," Imogen pleaded. Just get out, I said. She stood there, but didn't move. Leave already! Imogen nodded. Her body is still in her bed, she said before she finally left. Leo was sobbing quietly, and I went up to him. I put my hand on his shoulder. Don't cry, Leo. I'm crying because I'm sad, not because I'm weak or stupid. Of course you are. I'm sorry. Leo continued to cry, and I said nothing. In point of fact, I felt nothing except for the embers of my rage mixed with anxiety over what my next steps would be. At some point, Leo began speaking again, but I was so distracted to ask him to repeat what he had said. He had wanted to know if I'd meant everything I'd said to Imogen. I shrugged. I don't know what I meant. I'm going to look in at Nana. You want to come? Leo shook his head. I opened the door to Nana's room. Nana's eyes were closed, and the gnarled hands were laid peacefully across her chest. I assumed Imogen had done that. Oh, Nana. I took a deep breath and kissed her wrinkled cheek. I became aware of the sound of whispering. Nana and I weren't alone. Natty was kneeling by the window at the side of the bed, her head bowed in prayer. Natty raised her head. I just came in to tell her about the wedding, and she's dead. Her voice was small and childish, still barely above a whisper. I know. It's like my dream, Natty said. No one's turned a stand that I can see, I said. Don't make fun, Natty admonished me. I'm serious. I'm not making fun. We all died in your dream, didn't we? And in reality, Nana is the only one who's dead. You knew this would happen someday. I told you as much last night. And in that moment, I began to realize just how ridiculous and wrong the things I'd said to Imogen had been. I regretted my behavior, and I wondered why my first response to anything was rage. Sadness, worry, fear. All those emotions come out as rage for me. Maybe if I had been braver in that moment, I would have cried. Yes, I knew she would die, Natty admitted, but part of me never really believed it. I suggest that we pray for Nana together. I took Natty's hand and kneeled down by her on the side of the dead. Say something out loud for her, Natty implored me. The thing you read at Daddy's funeral. You remember that? Natty nodded. I remember a lot of things. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even if he dies. And everyone who lives in me and believes in me will never die. I stopped. I'm sorry, Natty. That's all I know by heart. No, that was it, she said. That was enough. It's so beautiful, isn't it? And it means she isn't really dead. Not in any important way, at least. Makes me feel so much less afraid somehow. Even less alone. There were tears in her eyes. You aren't alone, Natty. I'll always be here for you. You know that. I'll wipe the tears from her cheeks. But Annie, what will we do now? You aren't old enough to take care of us. Will Leo then? Leo will be our guardian, yes. I'll go on taking care of everything else just as I always have. As far as you're concerned, nothing will change. I swear. This, I realized, was how parents ended up lying to children. They promised certainties when all they had were pretty speculations. I prayed to God this would go down smoothly. In fact, I should really go call Mr. Kipling right now to begin making arrangements. There was so much to do. If I hadn't begun right away, the burden of all might paralyze me. I took Natty by the hand and led her out of the room. I closed Nana's door just behind us. I went to my bedroom and immediately picked up the phone. Mr. Kipling had only recently returned to work after his heart attack. Anya, he said, I have Mr. Green on the phone. He'll be listening in from now on. It's a precaution I'm taking in case I should go into recurrence, though I have no reason to believe this will be so. Hello, Simon, I said. Hello, Miss Balanchine, Simon Green replied. What can we do for you today? Mr. Kipling asked. Galena is dead. I kept my voice cool. Sorry for your loss, Mr. Kipling said. I am too, Simon Green added. She was very old. It had already begun to feel as if I was speaking of someone I had barely known. While I'm very sorry for your loss, I also want to reassure you, Anya. As you are well aware, everything has been arranged to make this transition as simple as possible for you and your siblings. Mr. Kipling then said he and Simon Green would come immediately to the apartment. Is Leo with you? Yes, I said. Good. He'll need to be in on these discussions. I'll make sure he stays put. Should I call the funeral home? No, Mr. Kipling said. We'll arrange that. I hung up the phone. I had felt as if there were a million things I needed to do, and yet, for the moment, it seemed there was nothing but to wait for Mr. Kipling and Simon Green to show up. I wanted to do something. I thought about calling Win, but the truth was, I didn't really want him around. This was a time for family. I lay down on my bed. Oh, Nana, how many times had I wished that your suffering would be over, that you would die? And how many times had I prayed for the opposite, that he might live forever, or at least until I was old enough to be Natty's legal guardian. Here it was, that day. And I felt nothing except perhaps guilty that I felt nothing. Maybe I'd seen too many hard things in my life. But then, so had Leo and Natty, and they both had cried. What was wrong with me that I could never muster a tear for my grandmother, who had loved, and who I know had loved me? The doorbell rang, which was just as well. I didn't want to continue along this line of thought anymore. I went to answer it. Mr. Kipling and Simon Green, of course. They had made exceptionally good time. Mr. Kipling, who I once would have described as a stout, had lost a great deal of weight since his heart attack. In his present manifestation, he looked a bit like a teddy bear with the stuffing removed. Annie, said Mr. Kipling, again, I am so sorry for your loss. Galena was a magnificent woman. We went to the living room to sit down. Leo was still there. He hadn't moved since Imogen had left. Leo, I said. He looked at me blankly. His eyes were nearly swollen shut from crying. He didn't remotely resemble the confident man I'd seen in the last several months. And this worried me. Come on, Leo, I thought. I continued. Mr. Kipling and Mr. Green are here to discuss what happens now that Nana has passed. Leo stood. He blew his nose on an already soggy handkerchief, then said, Okay, I'll just go to my room. No, I said. You need to stay for this. You're a very important part of everything that's about to happen. Come and sit next to me. Leo nodded. He pulled his shoulders back and walked over to the sofa and sat down. Simon Green and Mr. Kipling sat in the two armchairs across from the coffee table from us. First, we made plans for Nana's funeral. This was as simple as Nana had clear written instructions. No open casket, no expensive coffin, no chemical preservation, no fancy marker, though I would like to be next to my son in the family plot in Brooklyn. Do you want there to be an autopsy? Simon Green asked me. Simon, I don't think that's necessary, Mr. Kipling disciplined. Galena has been sick for many years. Yes, well, Simon Green said. What did lead up to her ultimate passing? I described what Imogen had said about the power failure. Why didn't the backup generator come on? Simon Green persisted. I don't know, I said. You trust this Imogen, right? Simon Green asked. No one could have gotten her. Maybe paid her off or something? Somebody who might have had a good reason for wanting Galena Balanchine dead. Who would have wanted Nana dead? Leo asked, his voice a bit quivery. Simon, you're being absurd and inappropriate. Mr. Kipling shot Simon Green a warning look. Imogen Goodfellow had worked for this family for years. She is loyal and a fine worker as there is. As for the circumstances of Galena's death, there is no mystery here. She was incredibly sick. It's amazing she endured as long as she did. The weeks leading up to her death, she and I had several discussions about the inevitability of her condition, She even confessed to me that she suspected her time would be soon, that she had even begun to hope for such a time. She told me the same thing I said. I looked at Leo. She did. Leo nodded. Then he nodded again. Finally, he said, "Wouldn't hurt anything to have." When Leo was upset, he sometimes lost language. But he said, he pointed at Simon, "The thing where they find out why she died? Then we would know for sure, right?" "An autopsy, you mean?" "Yes, an autopsy," Leo repeated. "Annie's always says that it is better to have more information than less." I admitted that had only been carousing Daddy. Mr. Kipling patted my brother on the hand and winced, because there had been a time, and not that long ago either, when Leo couldn't bear to be touched by anyone who wasn't immediate family. But Leo was fine. He barely seemed to register the touch. Actually, Leo, though usually I couldn't agree more with your sister and your father about the power of information, in this instance, there are things having an autopsy confirmed. Would you mind if I explain to you what they are? Leo nodded, and Mr. Kipling laid out his argument. Your grandmother is dead, and nothing is going to change the fact. There is no reason to believe she died of anything but old age and the cumulative effects of her illness. But if this family authorizes an autopsy, it will seem as if we've had reason to believe that there was another possible cause to her death. It will seem as if we believe there is more to the story, and that there is the last thing this family needs. Leo nodded. Why? Because you and your sisters cannot afford the exposure. You are certainly aware of that. As the only sibling who is over 18, you are becoming Natty and Annie's guardian. Yes, Leo said. If the living arrangements of your family become a matter of public interest, Child Protective Services could try to take Natty and Annie away from you, Leo. You are very young, and people are aware of your medical history. The authorities could send Natty and Annie to foster care if, for some reason, you are deemed an unfit parent. No, Leo said. No, never. Oh, don't worry, Leo. I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that never happens, Mr. Kipling said. And this is why I'm advising you to make no moves that bring any unwanted attention to your immediate family. The folks at the social services are entirely overwhelmed. No one will care about your living arrangements unless you give them reason to. There was a pause. Yes, what you say. This makes sense to me, Leo said finally.
That's good,
said Mr. Kipling. Do you think Leo should give up his job, I asked. I don't want to do that, Leo roared. He's still working at the pool, I explained. Mr. Kipling ran his fingers through the invisible hair on his bald head. Ah, yes, I never did resolve that situation at the animal clinic, did I? I apologize, Anya, my heart attack. But it's really inexcusable on my part. Mr. Green, would you make a note? Simon Green obeyed and said nothing. Indeed, he hadn't said a word since suggesting the autopsy. His expression reminded me of a basset. Do you enjoy your work at the pool? Simon Green asked my brother. Yes, said Leo. Very much. What kind of things do they have you do? I get lunch for the men, and I get snacks and drinks, too. And I drop off the laundry. And they treat you well? Yes. I absolutely understand your concern, Anya, but I don't think Leo should quit his job at the pool, Mr. Kipling concluded. Even with the taint of organized crime, it is better that he appeared to have been consistently employed. Mr. Kipling looked at my brother's eyes. You must promise never to do anything dangerous or illegal. You are the protector of Anya and Natalia now. You are extremely important. Leo sat up straight and nodded solemnly. I promise. Good, said Mr. Kipling. In terms of administration of this household, most everything else will continue as it always has. Of course, I already knew this. Mr. Kipling was really speaking to Leo. Your finances have been placed into a trust that I will manage until Annie is of age. Leo didn't question these arrangements, nor was he insulted by them, as Nana had feared he might be. He accepted all of it unquestionably, and this was a relief. Despite Simon Green's gaffe, Mr. Kipling had done well in making Leo feel valued. We went on a while, discussing plans for Nana's modest service. Mr. Kipling was adamant that the wake shouldn't take place in our apartment, but that it needed to be in a private location where our mafia relatives would feel safe and comfortable paying their respects. Mr. Green and I will come up with something. We were just about finished with all the immediate business when the doorbell rang. It was the undertaker, come to take Nana's body to the funeral home. Leo excused himself to his bedroom. I think he was a little afraid of Nana's corpse. Why don't you see if the undertaker needs any help? Mr. Kipling said to Simon Green. Simon Green was being dismissed, and he knew it. Mr. Kipling was perspiring, so I suggested we go out to the balcony. How is your health? I asked him. Much better, thank you. I almost feel 62% normal. Keisha is watching everything I eat. She doesn't want me to accidentally end up getting something with flavor. He put his arm around my shoulders in a paternal way. I know how much you love Galena and how much she loved you. I know how sad you must be. I didn't say anything. I worry about you. The way you keep everything inside. Annie, it's not healthy, Mr. Kipling laughed, though I don't know who I'd be giving health advice to. Annie, there's something you and I haven't discussed. I hesitate to even bring it up, but I feel I must. Yes? The Delacroix boy, Mr. Kipling said. Of course. He'd seen the news just like everybody else. Silverstein has finally announced his retirement, which means Charles Delacroix will surely declare his candidacy for DA any day now. And when he does, it will bring attention to him and everyone in his orbit. Yes, I understood what he was getting at, and it was something I've thought about many times myself. I'd said as much to Scarlett back in November. You think I should end it with Wynne? No, I never presumed to tell you that, Anya. But the timing of things, Galena's death, and Leo becoming your guardian, and Mr. Delacroix's political aspirations, might not be ideal. I wouldn't be a good advisor to you if I didn't at least pose the following question. Is this relationship worth potential scrutiny? My brain said no, but my heart... You don't have to answer this right now, Mr. Kipling said. We'll be in touch a great deal over the next several weeks. Well, through the glass door, I could see Simon Green beckoning us into the living room. Mr. Kipling apologized for Simon Green. He shouldn't have suggested the autopsy in front of your brother. Simon means well, and he isn't without intelligence. I'm afraid he still has much to learn. Mr. Kipling and I went back into the living room, where the undertakers needed Mr. Kipling to sign some paperwork regarding the transfer of Nana's body. At the moment, Nana's body was on a gurney enclosed in a black vinyl bag with a zipper that ran down the middle. Seeing her there, it occurred to me that no priest had given Nana last rites. I worried for her soul and mine. No one gave her last rites, I said to Mr. Kipling. She told me she was dying, but I didn't listen. I could have gotten her a priest. It's all my fault. Annie, Mr. Kipling said gently, your grandmother wasn't a Catholic. But I am, I moaned, and I don't want her to go to hell. Mr. Kipling said nothing. We both know that Nana had done some hard things in her life, but it wasn't worth pretending that it was otherwise. Galena Balanchine would have needed every possible advantage if she were to have any chance of making it into heaven. That night after Nana's body had left for the funeral home in Brooklyn, after I'd served Leo and Natty macaroni, after I'd stripped the bed in Nana's room, after I'd confirmed with Mr. Kipling that the pool is an acceptable location for Nana's wake, after I made Natty take a shower and put her to bed, after I've given Leo an aspirin for a headache so bad I made him cry, after I prayed for Leo's headache wouldn't turn to a seizure, after I put myself to bed, only to be wakened by Natty having a nightmare, after I comforted my sister, after Leo called me on the way back to my room, wanted to please check and see that Nana's window was open, the door was closed. After I'd done all that and gone to bed a second time, after all these things I'd done, it was quiet. It was quieter than I could remember the apartment having been in years and years. The machines that had kept Nana alive had been so noisy, and yet I had grown so used to the noise, I suppose. and it was this strange, new silence that seemed noisy to me now. I couldn't fall asleep, so I got out of the bed and went to Nana's room. As long as Nana had been ill, the room had always smelled a bit sour to me. Now it smelled like nothing. How quickly that had happened. The room had been Daddy's office before Nana had moved in with us. I don't think I ever mentioned this before, but it's the room where Daddy was murdered. The first night Nana came to stay with us, I had thought she was going to sleep in Mommy and Daddy's old bedroom, but she told me that my parents' room would be my new room. I had been sharing with Natty to that point, that she would use Daddy's office. Even though I was only 9, I didn't think it was right that she should have to sleep where her own son was murdered. There had still been bloodstains on the rug. And I told her it wouldn't be a problem for me to bunk with Natty. No, Agnieszka, she said. If we don't use this room, it will forever be the place where your father died. It will be a memorial when what it needs to be is a room. It is never a good idea to keep a coffin in the middle of one's house, my darling. Besides, you're a big girl. And a big girl needs her own room. I didn't entirely understand what she was saying at the time, and I can remember even being a little angry at her. Daddy died in that room, was what I wanted to say. Show some respect. But now I realize how much strength it must have taken for her to sleep there. Daddy had been her only biological child. Though she hadn't let on, she must have been grieving too. I looked atop Nana's nightstand and then in the drawer to see if she left me a note. Nothing except pills and Imogen's copy of David Copperfield. I sat down on the bare mattress. I closed my eyes and imagined Nana saying, "Get a bar of chocolate and share it with someone you love." I opened my eyes. No one would ever say those words to me again. No one would want me to have something sweet just because. No one would care who I share my chocolate with. There's less love for me in the world than there had been even 24 hours ago. I buried my face in my hands and I did my best to cry without making any noise. I didn't want to wake my siblings. Nana had loved me. She had really loved me. Despite this, I was relieved that she was dead. The truth of this made me cry even harder. I fell asleep in Nana's room that night. I woke to the sunrise, and I couldn't see from my own west-facing bedroom. I could understand why Nana had liked this chamber. The closet was bigger than mine. The morning light was spectacular. Mr. Kipling and I had discussed the importance of sticking to the regular routine, and especially of Natty and me needing to attend school as usual. So we did. We were swollen-eyed and unprepared, but we were there. I told Scarlett in fencing. She cried and said nothing particularly helpful. I told Wynne at lunch. He wanted to know why I hadn't called him or told him earlier. I would have come, he said. There's nothing for you to do, I said. Still, he insisted. You couldn't have been alone. I couldn't help but think about my discussion with Mr. Kipling. I looked at Wynne, and I wondered if I should give him up. More to the point, I wondered if I could give him up. Wynne, do me a favor. Don't tell your father about my grandma dying yet. As if I would, he said. I don't tell him anything. I know, I said. I don't want to end up a problem for your father to solve. Wynne changed the subject. When's the funeral, he asked. I'll go with you. There won't be a funeral, just a wake at the pool this Saturday. Family only. I don't think it was a great idea that Wynne could go with me. You don't want me to come, you can just say, It's not that. Suddenly, I was exhausted. I'd slept very little. I was having trouble with being sensible. It's not as if I have nothing better to do than go to your grandmother's funeral, Wynne said. I'm tired, I said. Can we discuss this later? Sure, Wynne said. I'll come over tonight. If I didn't manage to say so before, I am incredibly sorry about your grandmother. You kissed me, though not in a sexy way. Gentle. Tender. Then the bell rang, and he had to get to his next class. I watched him jog across the chessboard cafeteria floor. His hips were slim, and his shoulders were square and broad. He moved gracefully, almost like a dancer. From behind, it was obvious to me how much of a boy he still was. Yes, he was a boy. He was just a boy. It wouldn't be easy, but I decided that if I had to, I could give him up. As a Catholic, I had learned early to accept renunciation as a part of life. Anya Balanchin, someone tapped me on the arm. It's one of Natty's teachers. I'd never had her. She was new. Had only been teaching a year or two, and had the sort of cartoonish enthusiasm one might expect in someone so inexperienced. I'm Kathleen Bellavoie. I was hoping I'd run into you today. Do you have a moment to talk about your sister? I'll walk you to your next class. It was all exclamation points with this lady. I nodded. Sure. If Natty was a little off in class today, well, we recently had a death in the family, and I'm very sorry to hear that. But no, it's nothing like that. The opposite, in fact. I want to talk to you because of how well she's doing. Your sister has a gift, Anya. A what? A gift? What subject do you teach again? Math, she said. Math. Natty has a gift in math. This was news to me. And science, though I don't have her for that subject. Listen, Mrs. Bellavoie said. May I call you Annie? I shrugged. That's how Natty refers to you. She talks about you constantly. Well, thanks for telling me about Natty's gift, I said. You see, there's this camp in Massachusetts for gifted children. 8 weeks in the summer. It's a chance for Natty to be with other children like herself. She needs a sponsor, and I'd be willing to accompany her. Why would I be willing to do that? Only because I believe in Natty. What would you want for it? I asked. You must want something. She blushed. No, nothing, except to see Natty be as successful as she deserves to be. I could not even begin to think about this. I had to worry about Nana's wake, social services, and about a million other things. Miss Bellavoie continued. I sent an application for her several months ago. You did what? Who the hell did this woman think she was? I apologize if I overstepped. Your sister has a truly extraordinary mind, Annie. The most extraordinary mind I've come across in all my teaching. How long's that been? Like 2 years? Oh, you're probably thinking that I haven't been teaching very long. Let's add my years of being in school, too. Natty could be the person who solves the water problem, for instance. Or anything. Anything! She sighed. Listen, Annie. I do have a selfish reason for wanting to help your sister. Simply put, I'm tired of how awful things have gotten. Don't tell me you've never asked yourself why things are the way they are. We all devote all our resources to trying to compensate for a lack of resources. Can you honestly remember the last time anyone in our society came up with anything new? Other than a law, of course. And do you know what happens to a society of old things? It either withers and dies. We are living in the dark ages, and half the people don't even seem to know it. We can't go on like this forever. Miss Bellavoie paused. Forgive me. When I'm passionate, I sometimes end up sounding muddled. The point is that Natty is someone who could honestly do anything. Minds like hers are only hope, and as her teacher, I wouldn't be doing my job if I let such a resource go to waste. Natty had always gotten good grades, but this is ridiculous. She's so extraordinary. Why hasn't anyone pointed this out to me before? I don't know, Mrs. Bellavoie said. Perhaps they are intimidated by your family. Or perhaps they saw Natty through a certain lens because of that. You mean they were prejudiced? I clenched my jaw. But I am new, and I have fresh eyes. And I am telling you now. we were outside Mr. Barry's classroom. She told me she would send me more information. Miss Bellavoie was a busybody, but decided that she wasn't a bad sort. I have to discuss this with I almost said grandmother, my brother, and our attorney. Daddy says that you make all the decisions in your family, Miss Bellavoie said, that everyone's protector. She wouldn't say things like that, I said. There must be a lot of burden for one person, Miss Bellavoie said. Truthfully, it annoyed me that someone else, some stranger, had observed things in Natty that I had not. Felt as if I had failed my sister. Natty's such a genius. Why didn't I ever notice? It's hard to see things that are right in front of us sometimes, Miss Bellavoie said. But I'm telling you, what she has is precious, and it needs to be encouraged and protected. Miss Bellavoie squeezed my hands. Then she winked at me and nodded as if we were conspirators. I opened the door to the classroom. Miss Bellavoie waved to Mr. Barry to let him know I had been with her. He nodded. Nice of you to join us, Miss Balanchine, he said. I was Miss Bellavoie. Didn't you see? Mr. Barry said, nothing. I mean, I saw you wave at her, I said. But you must have seen. That's enough, Mrs. Balanchine. Please have a seat. Instead of sitting down at my desk, I walked to the front of the classroom and put my face right up against his face.
Oh,
I think
bugger.
you did see, I continued. You just like being sarcastic. You enjoy belittling us, don't you? You enjoy the teeny tiny bit of power you have. You play us against each other so you can win our favor. It's pathetic. You're being inappropriate, you said. And when I say it's, I actually mean you. You're pathetic, I replied. I picked up my bag and began heading toward the headmaster's office. Mr. Barry yelled, "Go to headmaster." I'm ahead of you there, I said. Maybe I shouldn't have gone to school the day after Nana died after all. Headmaster wasn't that tough on the account of the death of my family. 1 day of suspension, starting tomorrow. This could hardly be called a punishment. Just a chance for me to stay home. I probably should have done that in the first place. I felt pretty sluggish all day. Natty, Scarlet, Win, and I rode the bus back to my apartment. Natty was wearing Win's hat. Hey, I said, did you guys know we happen to have a genius among us? Well, I wouldn't say I'm a genius, Scarlet said, though I am pretty talented. Not you, I said. Natty. I can believe it, Win said. Her head's nearly as big as mine. Look how she fills out that hat. Natty said nothing. So, what are you a genius at, kid? Win asked. Math, Natty said. And stuff. I never knew that, Scarlet commented. It's news to all of us, I said. Well, congratulations, I guess, Scarlet told Natty. When we got to the apartment, Natty ran into her room and slammed the door. I didn't feel like going after her, but I did. I turned the knob, but it was locked. Come on, Natty, let me in. Why did you embarrass me like that? Natty yelled through the door. Why didn't you ever mention you were a genius? I yelled back. Stop calling me that name. What name? Genius. It's not a name, it's a compliment. So, why didn't you ever tell me? Why did I have to hear it from some dumb teacher who looks younger than me? Miss Bellavoie is not dumb. No, I'm the dumb one. I didn't even notice my own sister was a genius. I sat down on the hallway outside Natty's room. Felt so stupid, Natty. Looked like I didn't even know you very well, or like I didn't care about you. Natty opened the door. I know you care about me, she said. It's just, I didn't even know I was one. I thought everyone was like me until Miss B said that they weren't. And when you figured it out, why didn't you mention it? Because I didn't want to worry you. You'd just gotten back from that horrible place, Liberty. And I didn't want to cause any more problems for you. And you were all in love with Win. But you being a genius? It should have been a good thing, right? Why would you think it was a problem? I guess because you're always saying that we should keep a low profile at school. So I try to keep quiet in class. I don't raise my hand too much. Half the time when I know the answer, I don't even say. You mean you tried to act less smart? That thought of my little sister trying so hard to be average was incredibly depressing. My skull felt like it was pressing to my eye. So I placed my head in my hands for a moment. But Natty, I whispered, that's not right. I'm so sorry, Annie. I was only trying to help. I told Miss B not to talk to you. There's no point. I raised my head slightly. My throbbing eye seemed to have resolved itself, somewhat. Do you want to go to the summer camp, I asked. No, said Natty. Maybe. What about your nightmares, I asked. I couldn't go with you, you know. I can't leave Leo. Besides which, I'm not exactly a genius. I don't know, Natty said. I haven't thought about that part. Well, we don't have to figure this out today, I said. You have to tell me these things, Natty, especially now that Nana's dead. I know I'm not Nana, or Mommy, or Daddy, but I try my best. I know, Annie. I know everything you do for me. For Leo, too. I wish I was older so I could help you more. I wish things weren't so hard for you. She put her skinny arms around me, and I couldn't help but think of what Miss Bellevoix had said about Natty being someone precious. Someone who needed to be protected. I had allowed myself to be distracted over the last several months. This was unacceptable, especially now that Nana was dead. I was responsible for this girl in my arms. In that moment, the magnitude of that hit me. Without me, she wouldn't live up to her potential. She might fall in with bad people. God knows we were surrounded by those. Without me, she might even die. Or if not die, fail to be the person she was meant to be. This might even be a worse than sort of death. I pulled my baby sister to me. I felt lightheaded and breathless, and like I might throw up. My chest was tight, and I wanted to punch the wall. I realized that this was love, and it was awful. All of a sudden, I really did have to throw up. I let go of Natty and ran down the hall to the bathroom. I made it to the toilet, but barely. I threw up for the next 10 minutes or so. When it was over, I noticed that someone was holding my hair back. I thought it was Natty, but when I turned around, it was Win. I'd forgotten he'd come back with me after school. Oh, I said, lunging to flush the toilet. You should go. I'm too disgusting. I've seen worse, he replied. Where's Natty? As in, why wasn't she the one in here, holding back my hair? She went to call Imogen. Considering how my last conversation with Imogen had gone, I doubted she would come. You should go, I told him. I don't want you to catch whatever horrible thing I've got. I never get sick, he said. I have an excellent constitution. Bully for you, I grumbled. Would you go already? I just want to be sick by myself, thanks. I got off the bathroom floor. I felt a little unsteady, but Win took my elbow and led me to my room. I collapsed into my bed and fell asleep. When I woke, Imogen was by my bedside. She had placed a cool washcloth on my forehead. My brain throbbed against my skull. My eyes were watering, my vision was blurry. Colored spots floated across the room. My stomach rumbled with acid. My skin was insanely itchy. I felt like I was dying. Am I dying? You have the chickenpox, Annie. Natty was inoculated, but you and Leo never were because there were vaccine rations those days. Were you worrying I was pregnant? That I had sex with Win and didn't tell you? I would never do that to you. Unlike some, I pride myself on being a very reliable narrator. Imogen continued. Maybe you caught them at your cousin's wedding? Did you notice anyone looking sick? I shook my head. Went to scratch my face, but Imogen had put cotton gloves on my hands. I can't be sick. I have a week to plan. There's so much to do with Nana's death, and school, and Natty, and Leo need me. And I sat up in bed. Imogen gently but firmly pushed me back down. Well, you won't be doing any of that until next week at the earliest. Why are you here? I asked. Because Natty called. She slipped a straw into my mouth. Drink. I obeyed. No, I said. I meant, why are you here after the horrible things I said to you? She shrugged. I had time on my hands. I did just lose my steady paycheck. She shrugged again. You were upset, Imogen replied. Drink more. I need fluids. I'm sorry, I said. I'm really sorry. I have a lot on my mind. You're a good girl, and I accept your apology, Imogen said. I'm so tired, I said. Then sleep, baby. She stroked my hair with a cool, clean, dry hand. It felt comfortable and comforting. Maybe Nana's last moments had been like this. Maybe her death hadn't been so bad. I closed my eyes. Then I opened them again. Did you know Natty's a genius? I suspected as much, Imogen replied. I wanted to scratch, but instead I said the secret horrible thing I've been carrying in my heart. Just a conversation, Mr. Kipling. I think I have to break up with my boyfriend. There it was. Why? He seems like a very nice young man. He is. He's the nicest young man I've ever known, I told her, but a long time ago. His father warned me that if I dated Win, my business would become his business. Now that Nana is dead, I'm worried that his father might try to interfere with us. You and I both know that if we went to court, Leo would never be proven a fit guardian. I coughed. My throat was so dry. Imogen pushed the straw into my mouth. The only way I can keep Natty and Leo and me safe is if we manage to fly under the radar until I'm 18. Imogen said. She pushed the straw toward me again. Drink! I drank. But I'm not in a relationship with the son. The father will have no need to bother with me. With us. I see, Imogen said. She set the glass on the nightstand, apparently satisfied that I had enough to drink. I was beginning to be horribly itchy again. I moved to scratch my arm. Imogen pressed it down. This will make you feel better, she said. She took a tube of lotion from the nightstand and began applying it to the welts that had sprouted on my skin. You don't know for sure that the father will do anything, she continued. Most parents want their children to be happy above all things. I thought of Charles Delacroix the day on the ride home from Liberty. I knew at least one parent who would do whatever he had to do to win, regardless of his child's happiness. I shook my head. I don't know for sure what the father will do, but I think being with this boy puts us in danger. And as much as Did I love Win? Did I really love him? Yes, I suppose I did. Love Win. I love Natty and Leo more. I can't put them in jeopardy for my silly high school love affair. If Nana were still alive, I just can't risk it. I knew what I had to do. It wouldn't be easy, but I would do it. I managed to pull off my glove, but Imogen stopped me from taking my gloved hand in hers. Remember, high school love affairs aren't always so silly, Annie, and you can't do anything right now. Your sickness will give you a couple of days to think. I really miss Nana, I said. I know most people saw her as some old woman in a bed, but I still really miss her. I was itchy and weak, and my eyes began to water. I miss having her to go over things with. I miss talking to her. It's inconceivable I would not hear her voice again. I just miss her, I said. Try not to speak. I miss her too, Imogen said. What would you like me to read to you? It's always helped your grandmother to sleep. I have one of my favorites with me. She held up her book so that I could see the title. Isn't that about an orphan? I asked. I hated those kinds of books. You can't avoid orphan stories, child. Every story is an orphan story. Life is an orphan story. We are all orphaned sooner or later. In my case, sooner. Yes, in your case, sooner. But you are strong, and God never gives us more than we can bear. I didn't feel strong. I felt like burying my head under the covers and never coming out. I was so awfully tired. Read your story if you must, I told Imogen. Chapter 1, she said. There was no possibility of taking a walk that day. We had been wandering, indeed, in the leafless shrubbery an hour in the morning. But since dinner, Mrs. Reed, when there was no company, dined early. The cold winter wind had brought with it clothes so somber, and rain so penetrating, that further outdoor exercise was now out of the question. Aside from trying not to scratch, I didn't do much of anything for the next 5 days. Because of my condition, I wasn't even able to attend Nana's wake. Scarlett and Imogen went with Natty in my place. I had told Scarlett to keep an eye out for Leo, too. Scarlett had got lucky and managed not to catch my pox. Oddly, the only other person at school who had gotten them was Mr. Barry. I didn't feel particularly bad about not being able to go to Nana's wake. In theory, I understood wakes. They were about respect for the living as much as they were respect for the dead. It is an emotional display in public venues part that I had trouble with. At Daddy's funeral, for instance, I had felt observed. By observed, I suppose I mean judged. It wasn't enough to be sad inside. You had to look sad for other people. But I was so sorry to subject my brother and sister to such scrutiny. I was grateful that my pox had given me an excuse not to go. I had been to plenty of funerals in my 16 years already. I helped my siblings pick out wake clothes. An old black tie for Daddy's for Leo. An old black dress of mine for Natty. Just before noon, Imogen and Scarlett showed up to meet my siblings. Finally, I was alone with my red spots, which I did my best not to worry. Aside from being itchy and unattractive, I did not feel especially unwell. Touch afternoon, the doorbell rang. It was Win, who I had not seen since the afternoon he discovered me on the bathroom floor. I still looked terrible. What was particularly annoying about that was how wonderful he looked. He was wearing a long olive green coat that looked like it must have belonged to a soldier who had served in an Arctic climate. His hair was a bit damp. He must have showered before coming over, and parts of it was even frozen in little spikes on account of how cold it was outside. And yes, the spikes were adorable. I brought something for you, he said, after I let him in. He reached in deep into his pockets and produced 4 oranges. Your favorite. I took one and pressed it to my nose. My mother's rooftop experiments are starting to bear fruit, he joked. This is called a Cara Cara orange. It's pink on the inside and incredibly sweet. He moved to kiss me, and I moved away. Are you afraid I'm contagious? I asked. He shook his head. I've had them. Still, people do get chicken pox a second time, and I won't get them a second time, he insisted. I moved even further away from him. How can you even want to kiss me? I'm completely disgusting right now. Completely, he said. I am. I've seen myself in the mirror, and I know. He laughed at me. All right, he said finally. I'm not here to force myself on you. I figured you want company while everyone else is at the visitation. Look, I'll even peel your orange for you. I told him that I could peel my own orange. Now those, he said, indicating the cotton gloves that Imogen had insisted I keep wearing. He put his hand over my gloved one and squeezed it. I became aware of my heart in my chest. I needed to end things with him. We went into the living room. He sat down on the larger sofa, which is upholstered in a brown velvet. I curled up next to him, resting my head against his ribs. He started to run his fingers through my hair, which annoyed me. But I didn't say anything. My hair is curly and prone to frizz, so I usually rather people not touch it. I was glad for the annoyance, which I found fortifying in a way. See, I thought, he isn't perfect. If I could focus on this one annoying thing he did, maybe I could end it. I sat up on the sofa. Then I got up and moved to the red chair. "What is it?" he said. I knew that it would be better to tell him that it wasn't working out, that we weren't compatible, that there wasn't always a reason for these things. Unfortunately, I didn't do this. When I said, "You can't be my boyfriend right now," I laid out my case to him just as I already have for you. I really liked him. NB. I did not use the word love. But my family is more important than my feelings, and now that my grandmother was dead, I couldn't risk having his father in my life, etc. Then he talked me out of it, or maybe I let myself be talked out of it. Maybe I wanted to be talked out of it. He told me that he loved me, and that I loved him, and that was the most important thing. He told me that I didn't get to make this decision by myself. He told me that his father wouldn't bother with me, and that he could control his father, even if his father even tried to interfere with my family. Even then, I knew this to be a ridiculous lie. I mean, I had met Charles Delacroix. He told me that love was the only thing that really mattered in this world. Another lie. But I was in a weakened state, and lies can sound awfully pretty when a girl is in love with the person telling them. The truth was, I couldn't at the moment bear the loss of wind too. We heard the front door open. It was only 1 o'clock, and I hadn't expected everyone back for at least another hour. I walked to the foyer. Leo blazed past me, running straight to his room and slamming the door behind him. Imogen, Natty, and Scarlet stood in the hallway, taking off their coats. "What happened?" I asked them, feeling guilty that I hadn't dragged my fox-ridden self to the wake. "Why are you back so early? What's wrong, Leo?" Scarlet answered, "We aren't sure. We were all together, but Leo went off with some of the guys he works for at the pool. I thought it would be okay, but the next thing I knew, there was yelling, and Leo had a black eye." "Wait," I said. "Leo has a black eye?" "I should go put something on it." Imogen excused herself to the kitchen. "Yes," Scarlet continued. "I didn't see it happen. None of us did. And he wouldn't say who did it. And then Yuji was telling all of us to get into his car." "Yuji? Yuji Ono? He was there?" "He's here," Natty added. And that's when I noticed Yuji Ono standing in the doorway, wearing a black coat. "I was still in the States, so I came to pay my respects," Yuji said. I pulled my bathrobe tighter against myself and wished for a veil to put over my head. "I hope you had chicken pox." "Yes," he said. "I was warned." Wynn was standing behind me. The foyer was getting incredibly crowded. Wynn held out his hand for Yuji to shake. "I'm Wynn." "He's Annie's boyfriend," Natty said. Yuji nodded. "I saw you at the wedding last weekend." "Nice to meet you." "Let's all go in the living room," I said. "No," said Yuji, bowing his head slightly. "I must go. I wondered if you might have a moment for us to talk alone before I depart. I was hoping to see you at the funeral, but I didn't know of your illness." "Yes, of course, Annie," Imogen called me from the hallway. "Can I speak to you?" "Excuse me," I said. "I'll only be 1 second." I scurried down the hallway to Leo's room, where Imogen was standing outside carrying a pack of frozen peas. Your brother's locked himself in and he won't open the door. I need you to pick the lock. I knocked on the door. Leo, it's Annie. Please let me in. No reply. I removed the fine nail that we kept above the door frame for exactly this purpose and began to work the lock. Despite the fact that my mind was occupied with questions, it only took me 15 seconds. I hadn't lost my touch. I took the peas from Imogen and told her I would go in by myself. Leo was seated on his bed, facing the window. He wasn't crying, which I considered a good sign. Leo, I said softly, you should put something on your eye. He didn't reply, so I sat next to him on the bed. I raised my arm to put the frozen peas on his face. He jerked his body away from me. Annie, leave me alone! Please, Leo, you don't have to talk. Just let me put this on your eye. With your medical history, I feel better knowing your head isn't swelling too much. I don't want you to have a seizure. Fine! Leo grabbed the peas from me and held them against his face. Thank you. You're very important to this family. To me, I added. And you have to take good care of yourself. At first, Leo didn't say anything. This stings, he said, moving the peas from his eye and setting them down on his lap. I finally got a look at his eye. The lid was swollen shut, and a pinkish-purple mark was spreading across his cheek. His skin was bleeding a little near his temple. Oh, Leo, who did this to you? He pulled the bag up to his eye again. I hit him first. Who? Who did you hit? When he had first been injured, Leo had trouble controlling his anger, but this hadn't been a problem for years. Annie, I don't want to talk about it. I need to know who hit you in case I need to do something about it, I said. It doesn't have to be that big of a deal, but we might have to apologize or, at least, talk to people, explain your condition. Leo threw the bag of peas at the window and the bag broke open. Peas rolled in every direction across the floor. Shut up, Anya! You're not the boss of me, and you don't know everything. Okay, Leo, you're right. Please just tell me who you hit. I need to know. Cousin Mickey, he said. You'll no doubt remember that Mickey was Yuri Balanchian's son and likely successors. Apologies would most certainly need to be made, and ideally, as soon as possible. Why, Leo? Did Mickey do something bad to you? Leo's gaze floated the upper right corner of the room. I peered up to see what there was, but I saw nothing. It's his fault Nana's dead, Leo said finally. Come again? If we hadn't been out of town for his stupid wedding, Nana wouldn't have died. She'd be here now, and I wouldn't be. Why did we even have to go to that wedding? Nana wanted us to, remember? She thought it was important for us to show respect to the rest of the family. Leo wrung his hands. It's a lot of pressure. It's too much pressure. It's a lot of pressure. What is, I asked? Being in charge of you and Natty. I miss Nana. I want Nana back. And Daddy. Oh, Leo. You aren't alone in any of this. I'm here. But you're my little sister. I need to protect you. I smiled. In a way, it was touching that he saw me that way. Leo, I really can take care of myself. I've been taking care of myself for some time. Leo said nothing. Can you lie down for me, Leo? I think it would be good if you rested. Leo nodded. I loosened his tie and took off his blood-stained dress shirt, and then he lay down. Do you think everyone's going to be mad at me? He asked. Don't worry about any of that right now. I'll explain everything. Everyone understands how hard Nana's death has been on us. I walked out of the room. Imogen was still standing in the hallway, so I asked her if she wouldn't mind keeping an eye on Leo. I had already planned on it, Imogen had said. Though when Natty and Scarlett had gone into the living room, Yuji Ono had remained in the foyer. As I retired my bathrobe, I wished very much I had gotten dressed that morning. I'm sorry to have kept you waiting. I know you're in a rush. Yuji waved his hand dismissively. I'd like to speak with you in private. Can we be heard here? I suggest we go out to the balcony. We walked through the living room past the others, to get outside. Wynn looked at me questionably, and I smiled slightly to let him know, no, it's fine. Why weren't you at the wake today? Yuji asked when I closed the door behind us. I told him that I'd been ill and I'd been feared infecting other people. Yuji studied my face, and this made me uncomfortable. As I was only wearing my bathrobe, I began to shiver. So Yuji offered me his coat. I declined, but he insisted, taking the coat off and placing it over my shoulders. What happened to make Leo strike Mickey? I asked. I am not sure I know. One moment Leo was speaking to his friend, Yuri's illegitimate son, with the prostitute. I cannot remember the young man's name. Yakov Perowski, I said. Jax. In the next moment, Leo was running across the room to deck Mickey. The reason I wanted to talk to you was because I was concerned that perhaps this Jax has an unhealthy influence on your brother. It's possible, but I don't think Jax put Leo up to striking Mickey Balanchine, if that's what you mean. I'm afraid one of our lawyers put the idea in Leo's head that, if we had gone to the wedding, Galena would still be alive, I explained. Yuji stretched out his hands and took a deep breath and bowed his head. I could tell he was debating whether to speak his mind. Anya? What I'm about to say, I say with the greatest respect for you and your family, and especially the relationship between our beloved fathers, now deceased. He paused to clear his throat. It is time for you to set your house in order. What do you mean? You have allowed things to get out of hand here, but it is not too late. I feel sure that your brother has come under the influence of Yakov Perowski, but it is more than this. The reason I made this trip to America was on behalf of the Big Five chocolate families. Do you know who they are? I nodded. The Balanchines here, you guys in Asia, and here I paused. I honestly wasn't sure which families would be considered the other big three. Yes, it was like you once, Yuji said. I spent my whole life living in the shadows of this business without really knowing anything about it. And what climates chocolate thrives, what the factories look like, why it became illegal in parts of the world, the people who make their livelihoods growing and distributing it, Enough, I interrupted him. I could tell that I was being insulted. Why should I know anything about it when I have no plans to ever work in it? Yes, Yuji said. I thought that once, and I, too, resisted. But, Anya, people like you and me, we don't get a choice. We were born into these destinies. You will be in chocolate whether you want to be or not. You are the oldest child of Leonard Balanchine, and I am not. Leo is. Leo was, Yuji insisted. You are a smart girl, and I know you understand what I mean by this. Said nothing. Can you honestly tell me that you consider it a wise strategy to have nothing to do with your family's business? Why were you in prison last fall? And why did your boyfriend end up poisoned and missing a foot? Why is your father dead and your mother? And so many in my family as well. Why is your brother the way he is? Anya, you're nearly a grown woman now, and it is time. And for what? I demanded. For you to accept your birthright and make the best of it, Yuji said. What about Yuri and Yuri's son? Don't they run the Balanchines? Not wisely. Not well. The other families perceive the weakness and the turmoil here. You see opportunities. And your uncle has made many enemies. He should never have become the head of the Balanchine family, and everyone knows it. Back when your father was killed, everyone thought your grandmother, Galena, would become the interim head of the Balanchine family, but she opted to care for you and your siblings instead. I had never known that. It's a very dangerous situation for you, Anya. More people will end up dead. Trust me. The free toxin and poisoning will only be the beginning of it. I have my responsibilities. The best way I can protect my family by which I mean Natty and Leo, is by keeping all of us out of it. Yuji looked me in the eyes. If I understand you correctly, chickenpox are only contagious before they scab. You could have been at Galina's wake today, but you chose not to be. Seems to me that you chose to spend this morning making out with your boyfriend instead. That isn't true. Isn't it though? Yuji said. What do you want from me? I said. I'm here because I'm a friend of your family, and that is what I was chosen to make a report to the other families on the dealings of Balanchines since the poisoning debacle. What will he say? I don't know yet, Yuji replied. In my opinion, your family is on the verge of great internecine turmoil. On the one hand, what may be in the best interest of the families is to allow this to occur. Once it is over, we'll all swoop in to divvy up the Balanchines' share of the market. I wasn't sure what internecine meant. I have to look it up later. On the one hand, I believe that it is better for the chocolate business to have strong partners. Your father was a great leader, and I believe that you could be a great leader too. You've become as warped as the rest of them. My father was no great leader. My father was a common criminal, a thief, and a murderer. No, Anya, you're wrong. Leonard Balanchine was a simple businessman, trying to make the best of a bad situation. Chocolate wasn't always illegal, and could be illegal again someday soon, too. Soon it may not even be about the chocolate. What will it be about? This is a longer discussion, I'm afraid. Perhaps child labor? But I believe, as do many others, that it will be water. We are running out of it, and the person who controls the water supply will control the whole world. I can't do any of this, I said. I'm just a girl, and I have to take care of my brother and sister. I'd like to finish high school, maybe even go to college. What you seem to be asking me is impossible. Here's something your father always said to me that I will now repeat to you. Yuji, you can either be a bystander who lives his life in reaction to the decisions others make, or you can be the leader who is making those decisions. It may have lost a little something in translation from Japanese, but you see my point. You say you want to protect your brother and sister above everything. I ask you, Anya, of those two people my father named, which one do you think is better able, better prepared to protect his or her family? The one who's run around trying to avoid conflict, or the one who knows there will be conflict and embraces it? Do you know what my father said is the best thing in life to be? I shook my head. Yuji was clearly passionate, but I wasn't sure I was completely grasping his point. The catalyst. In a chemical reaction, the catalyst instigates the change, but is not changed itself. Your father is dead, Yuji reminded him, as is mine. At that moment, another Japanese man came onto the balcony. This man was the most enormous person I had ever seen in the flesh. He had a round belly and big arms like a sumo wrestler. He wore a black suit and his black hair was in a ponytail. He could have been anything out of Yuri's bodyguards. He must have been waiting in the exterior hallway the entire time. He spoke several sentences in Japanese, and Yuji replied in kind. Yuji bowed his head towards me. I must go, he said in a much more formal manner. I am leaving for Asia this afternoon. I have extended this visit as long as I could. Perhaps even longer than was wise. We won't be seeing each other again very soon. If you ever need to speak with me, please don't hesitate to call, though. Goodbye, Miss Balanchine. Good luck. He bowed his head again. I walked him to the door, past Wynn and Scarlet and Natty again, and then I went into the bathroom to splash some water on my face before going back to the living room. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. All my welts were scabbed over, and though I was feeling better, my physical appearance was at its most gruesome. Some tiny part of me felt vaguely embarrassed that handsome, 23-year-old Yuji Ono had been forced to see me looking so ugly. I'd rather have not seen anyone in this condition, let alone my childhood crush. Still, I realize now it had been more than a mistake not to go to Nana's wake. It had been selfish and a sin. I should have anticipated that Leo might have reacted in such a way. Yuji had been right. Despite what I said before, it had not been enough fear of infecting other people or poor health that had stopped me from going, but vanity. It was a good lesson. I went into my bedroom to put on clothes. Though I wouldn't have minded to spend the rest of the day in bed, there were things yet to be done. I needed to go see Yuri and Mickey Balanchine to explain about my brother. The doorbell rang. I thought it might be Yuji Ono come back to tell me all the other ways in which I was failing, but it wasn't. It was Mr. Kipling and Simon Green. They had tied up the business at the wake and had come to check on Leo and the rest of us. Yes, I reported. We're all fine enough. Leo's resting, and I'm on my way to make amends with Yuri and Mickey. Would either of you happen to know the word internecine means? Bloody, they replied in unison. It's a bloody conflict within a group. Simon Green continued. Something for a school report? Mr. Kipling asked. I shook my head. You look awful, Simon Green added unhelpfully. Thank you, I replied. No, I only meant, are you sure you're up to going out? Simon Green asked. I'd rather not, but I don't think it can be put off, I said. Anya is right, Mr. Kipling said. When small wounds are left untreated, they can fester and become far more serious injuries. We'll take you there if you'd like. No, I replied. I think it's best if I go alone. It seems less formal. Mr. Kipling agreed that my instincts were probably right, but he insisted that he and Simon Green ride the bus with me to the pool